Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to talk about a movie called Await Further Instructions. So, this is a Netflix movie that I had saw at one point, reviewed at one point, and then I just decided, well, you know what? I'm doing a new review channel here, so I thought, let's kind of throw this movie into the mix. I'm not doing this off of memory. I'm doing this off of watching it again and reflecting on it and just going like, man, this movie was really good, but there was also not quite enough going on in this movie. Plus, it just had a very odd uh, way of about going to end this movie, and it also just kind of had like a thing that was just kind of like out there that it's just like, well, like we really just want to have this movie done in one house. Uh, so this movie does kind of feel it feels cheap, but then again, it also like towards the very tail ending, it's kind of like, okay, how exactly did they do the very tail end of this movie? Was it all done through CGI, or did they like have like one uh shot where they just kind of like how did they do the end shot, the very last kind of shot, or uh stuff here and there? Like it was a pretty interesting movie because we had it to where we had a kid coming home for Christmas, and he is just to be stuck in this odd scenario where he is to come home for Christmas to a family that he is not liked by, or vice versa, and so he's bringing home his girlfriend, who is uh, Angie, I think, and so we have it to where Nick brings home this girl named Angie, and to just have Christmas together, and we have it to where things are to go horribly awry, to where all of a sudden people are all of a sudden stuck inside of their home, waiting for instructions from a TV to tell them exactly what to do. We eventually have it to where people are starting to conspire against one another. We have it to where especially the father is just goes bat crap crazy, and I just don't quite understand why. I guess when people are put into the most strenuous of circumstances, or feeling like they are not to quite exactly understand what is to go on, or some people have that uh, like, oh, I'm getting orders, so I will follow that to the nth degree kind of way of approaching things. We have it to where the TV is telling people what to do, and they are following it to the letter. And there is no debate. There is no, like, well, hey, let's see what happens if we don't do what it says. There isn't a lot of that. It's just everybody is just like, hey, let's trust what this thing is telling us. And I would immediately say, well, no, let's wait and see if, like, we don't do what it says. What is going to happen? I think there could have been an alternative for that as well, because we end up having one character seemingly being taken out, and I'll explain that in spoiler version. So I guess when looking at it, it's like, well, if you don't do exactly what it does, there's an alternative for that. I thought this movie was interesting up until the very end. Like, I really liked how you have a family that all of a sudden is just really just turning on one another. They don't trust one another. We have it to where like the grandfather is kind of like backseat parenting, and we have it to where there's like an entire backstory that the father delivers about the grandfather. And I thought that that was just kind of like, man, like this is really fascinating how they're really giving us so much backstory to invest in these characters. The only downside of it is there's so much downside because either the TV isn't telling them much of what to do, or like this movie is really just sold by the actors. It's not sold by anything else because a lot of what these people are doing are just waiting to have the next like pen fall kind of thing, and so they're just kind of waiting around to eventually see what the heck that this TV is going to tell them next, or whatever is going to come down their chimney. Let's just say, uh, I I kind of wish that we would have more movies like this where we would have like a fractured family that is being now put in like the worst case scenario. Like I kind of, and that's what I kind of enjoyed about War of the Worlds, where we kind of had like a fractured family and they are to come together to take care of one another because alien invasion kind of thing. Like I think when looking at this film, uh, that is kind of the same circumstances, but we really have it to where this entire family is all stuck into this home because these aliens have made it to where like these people cannot escape this house. Even for anyone to attempt and or try ends up injuring themselves, and I'll explain that again in spoilers. I would say that this, if you haven't seen this movie yet, I think it's a fairly interesting film because story. Uh, a lot of people would say, like, kind of here and there, where they kind of could feel like this is a cheap film because it's really all done with this whole entire family into this house, and they're kind of like stuck in this home and they can't go anywhere, and like a lot of people just call that a cheap movie and whatever. uh, and plus the ending is just bizarre. So by and large it's a good movie, I think, because I just enjoy the thrill of it or the story of it, because the actors just sell this story. The actors sell the backstories of every character, and like every little crumb of something that somebody just says in this movie just kind of adds to the film, where we have it right away to where Angie's like, "Hey, we're going home for holidays," and Nick is like, "Yeah, and you're gonna regret it," kind of thing. And so like that's the thing that I enjoy about this movie, is it just like there's little subtle things that people say that um like sets up the movie, and you have it to where like people are conspiring and having conspiracies about every little thing, and that's also what I do enjoy about it as well. So and plus the TV is kind of creating paranoia between family, which I just thought is just so bizarre. It's just like, dude, like this family can just be pulled apart simply by a TV telling them what to do. Interesting. So let's go into spoilers, because at the end of the day, this movie is better that way. Into going into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this movie. So await further instructions. So again, we have it to where immediately when this movie opens, we have Nick and Angie driving into their family's home. Angie's like, "Well, hey, like, isn't this going to be great for you to finally see your family?" And Nick is like, "Ugh, like, you're gonna regret this. Like, believe me, you are." And then she would. So we go on in here to have a cluster of characters. We have the granddad, who is played by David Bradley. A lot of people might remember him from the Harry Potter movies as the, like, I would call him, I guess, like the janitor, or the janitor of the Hogwarts, I guess. maybe more than that. Maybe like the groundskeeper or something, but that's more of Hagrid than he. But anyways, he is of course to play the granddad, and man, is he just like he is overly like racist, insulting, backseat parenting, and all kinds of interesting things, but he won't last very long in this movie, sadly enough. So we have Tony, who is the father, that again is kind of like uh, he's looking at his son, and his son is just not good enough for him. And so, hence why Nick had gotten out of that house because he wasn't good enough for his father. And so, we end up having it to where I think Tony is the most interesting character. Like, the father is the most interesting character, hands down. It seems like there are many layers to this character because we have it to where Tony had mentioned that he's like, well, hey, I'm a manager. I have people that rely on me, and I talk to them and whatever. And I think like Tony is taking his work home with him because immediately when uh, like we say that this guy's a manager, like we have it to where like he seems to be doing the exact same thing that he would do at work at home. So this guy is like he's basically hiring people to come to his side. He's basically uh, like giving people a review of just like, well, I would have liked if you would have called ahead of time to let us know that you were coming home for Christmas, because that's basically what Tony does. We have Kate and Scott. Kate evidently is pregnant with child, and it's so I think Scott is some kind of doctor or something, and so we have it to where he is to just be taking care of the baby, and it seems like they just weren't working during the. I don't know. I don't know what's going on with them. Because there isn't enough backstory, I think, enough with these people besides what they were thinking about baby names and so on and so forth. So we have it to where Beth, of course, is the mother, and it seems that she's very nice, but then eventually she ends up just losing her mind at some point because like she is kind of in the middle of the road with everything. It seems like with this character, she's a very much tug and war like character, to where she has to play to both sides. She has to try to win over her husband, but then she also has to try to win over her own flesh and blood son. Even at some point, we end up having it to where Beth tries to seduce Tony, and Tony's like, "Dude, we don't have time for that," or like, "There's like, what are you doing? What are you playing around with?" And like, we have it to where Tony has a stick so far up his buttuckus that this guy like can't see straight. Like that's how far the stick has gone. So like this guy is not a guy that is at any point in time going to have fun in this story. Nothing he's going to do is fun. This father. So isn't that great to have a stick in the mud dad? That just really sucks. Uh, so going on here. So we end up. Let me pause here for a second. So we go on and have Nick and Angie making their way into this home to where immediately we have it to where, of course, the grandfather is saying something very, quite possibly racist or offensive to, of course, Angie, to where Nick has to basically tell him to take it back. And we have it to where the family is, like, we have it to where reasonably, like, the family is consistently within this movie taking sides. We have it uh, to where recently Kate and Scott are basically on the side of their father because why wouldn't they? That's why Nick is gone. And so we end up having it to where like the father is basically not going to scold his father. It's just like, well, hey, just let him go, kind of thing. And we have it to where like Nick is just like, well, no, like he said something insulting, and like take it back. And reasonably, it's just, anyways. So we move on. So family squabbles. We really have it to where uh, people are going to say whatever they want, and like it's not going to work out on the side of either Nick or Angie. Uh, so it's just we have it to where this entire family is always siding against Nick and Angie in this entire film, and it kind of gets straight up ridiculous, but it is what it is. So we have it to where the TV ends up going uh, horribly awry, and so that's what makes it to where all of a sudden now all the windows and all the doors are all sealed, locked, and with alien stuff around them, to where one of the families trying to leave out the door and couldn't, and so we end up having it to where eventually people are starting to get paranoid. They're just like, well, hey, maybe this is the government. Maybe like there's like a virus that we're not aware of, and so that's why they just sealed us into our home. If anything, there's a little pipe that kind of comes in to the home. I guess the father had mentioned it. It's like, oh well, yeah, that's just so that way we can breathe in clean air or something along those lines. So we have the family all decide to go on like as if this was a normal Christmas. And so we have people that start to unwrap their presents and eat food. And so I think eventually they have a point within this movie to where there is a paranoia going on that quite possibly it could be the food that they were eating that could have been poisoned. And so we have it to where the dad ends up getting rid of like all the food so that way nobody eats or drinks it because it could be poisonous food or whatever. Like the paranoia of people is just crazy. And so we go along here to have like there's like we have it to where like the dad is like making so many conspiracy theories and stuff like that about like, well, hey, like we have to do exactly what the TV says to the letter, and like there's no backing out of that. So we go on and we have the TV tell people that they have to now go and inject themselves with these needles, and they drop a bag of needles through this chimney and tell them to go inject every single one of them with these needles. And so we have Angie, who is a doctor, that looks at these needles, and she says, some of these needles have already been like used. It's obvious. And so we end up having it to where Tony is immediately like, well, we have to inject all of ourselves. It's what the TV says to do. So we have it to where we have Tony immediately just inject himself because he's like, yep, I'm doing what the TV told me to do. And I'm like, dude, like, this could have not actually been whatever vaccine or whatever. Like, this could be like paranoia medication or whatever. Like, they could have laced this needle with any number of medications to make people go even crazier. And so we end up having people one by one inject themselves. And so we have it to where Kate ends up hesitating because she's like, well, I don't know if this drug is going to affect my babies, so I don't know if I should inject myself. And they're like, well, you have to. So Kate and Scott inject themselves. Tony injects themselves. I think the mother injects herself. And then Nick and Angie are kind of like holding themselves up. Just be like, well, I don't think that we should be injecting ourselves with this. But the family, like, basically kind of just, like, says, like, well, you have to. Like, we all have had. Like, so you should. We even had the granddad who ends up getting the injection, and he ends up falling over and dies. Good riddance, I guess. Sadly enough. With the exclusion of the actor, just... I didn't like that role. Like, that granddad was to just be put in there to just do a lot of backseat parenting, because we had at some point when Tony is not getting his house in order, and especially when this thing is popping off, we end up having it to where the granddad is telling him, it's like, dude, like, get your house in order, like this event is popping off, and like you have weak sons, and you have a weak son, and you have a weak family kind of thing. So like, get your house in order, like get it to where like because obviously granddad doesn't like how Tony's family has turned out. So we have it to where Tony's like, well, hey, like, I was a manager, and so I could be able to just strengthen my family, believe me. And so we end up having it to where when grandfather croaks up dead, we end up having Angie like pointing at the granddad, and he's like, and she's like, see, he croaked, he's dead. Hence why I didn't put the needle in my arm, because I could have been dead. But again, they're forced to all take the needles. The rest of everyone survives. Nobody croaks. So we move on. So the first thing that they needed to do was to isolate the dead person. And so they are to put Granddad into a separate room. And we end up having it where Tony is talking with Nick about his granddad and how his granddad was really, really strict. It seems that maybe granddad had some like military background which made him that way, or something like that. To where Tony gives this story about his father wanting him to only be up and about at a certain time of night. So if Tony were to need to go to the bathroom, he couldn't do it in the middle of the night. Like that, he had to like hold it until the very next day. Until it was good enough for everyone to be awake, for somebody to be stirring around and going to the bathroom. And I guess Tony couldn't hold it, and so he went out one night to go to the bathroom, and he got beaten the crap out of by his dad, because he said, well, like, a real man would have held it. It's like, what kind of garbage story is this where it's like, dude, if somebody's got to go to the bathroom, somebody's got to go to the bathroom. Like, what are they going to do? Like, crack open their window and then just, like, pee out the window or crap out the window? Just to suffice that, like, hey, I didn't go to the bathroom. I just crapped out my window. Hey, isn't that great? So we end up having it to where eventually we start to find out that Angie seems to have a slight cough. And so immediately, like, Tony is conspiring. That's like, well, hey, like, obviously Angie had caught something while being on her emergency doctor's shift. So there's something up with her. Like, the whole family is all of a sudden against Angie, and immediately they're also against her because of her race, which I thought was horrible. But then on top of that, because like everybody's just like, well, yeah, like she just came in here from another country and stole a bunch of jobs from people and blah blah blah, all that garbage. And so, but we end up having it to where Angie is supposedly like sick somehow, and so probably from a used needle, and so we end up having it to where they have to quarantine her off. So they end up putting Angie in the exact same room where Granddad was, and because Tony says, hey, the TV is telling us that we have to seal off the dead and the otherwise infected or the otherwise sick. So, Angie, you're going into another room. And so Nick is just like, are you kidding me? And so we have it to where Nick is basically just in front of the door, just talking to Angie about stuff and just kind of talking things out. And so we eventually have Nick go down to his sister and like just starts talking things out. And here's also the thing. So we had it to where Scott went and put the needles into some tiny opening, and eventually he tried to open the opening wider to talk to anybody, and he ended up losing his fingers, which they had to sew his fingers shut so he could not bleed out, and so on and so forth. So, interesting enough. So, we have it to where Nick is talking to Kate, and Kate says, well, hey, like, yeah, my babies are moving because she's pregnant. And so we have it to where Nick touches the belly, and like Scott kind of gets upset, and so we end up having it to where both Scott and Nick are kind of having a fight out, and that kind of leads them like to have a fight out up these stairs, and Kate follows them. And because here's the thing, we have Tony who is going to Scott because evidently Nick is a lost cause. And so Tony is going to Scott and asking him, it's like, well, hey, like, are you on my side, Scott? Tony says this. Are you on my side, Scott? Like, if anything, like, this is a time to, like, enlist people into, like, so are you on my side, Scott, kind of thing. And so we have it to where, like, Scott is like, well, like, I'm really on the side of Kate, and I guess the side of Kate is the side of her father, so sure, like, that's where I am, I guess. And so we end up having it to where, I guess, since really Scott and Kate and Tony are all on, like, all against Kate and Angie, I guess it's just like, well, so we end up having this argument over seemingly nothing, and it ends up having it to where Kate ends up accidentally falling over this railing and then falling onto the ground. And so they assess that she had quite possibly broken her leg, but she's not exactly coherent either. I'm like, oh my god, what happened to the baby? So we have it to where Nick is talking to Angie, and immediately Angie's like, yeah, like she is that whatever happened to her does not sound good. It's probably going to mean that she is going to die soon unless she doesn't have real hospital help. And so we end up having it to where really everybody is pretty much just blaming Nick for Kate's accident, pretty much. They're not blaming Scott, obviously. They're not like shunning that guy. And so, because really just Tony, I think, is blaming Nick. So, because Tony has Scott on his side, so he's not going to blame Scott. He's immediately just going to point a finger at Nick, really. Just like, yeah, you guys with your rough housing and whatever, like, so on and so forth, you stupid young kids. So we end up having it to where we have like Nick trying to talk to Scott to try to get him on his side, because Scott starts talking about this story about him choosing the kids' names and what the kids' names would have been. Because we have it to where when where Kate was injured and she had fell and everybody is scrambling to get around her, we have it to where Scott was looking at the TV, and the TV had said the words, I'm looking at you, or I see you, or something like that. So Scott bizarrely had seen some message that didn't quite make sense to him, and eventually we have it to where Scott eventually tells Nick that he's like, dude, this is the message that I saw, and I was kind of weirded out by that. I didn't quite understand exactly what that meant. And so we eventually have it to where Beth goes and she is kind of distraught about her daughter quite possibly dying, and so she bizarrely ends up going and talking to the TV to have the TV help her fix her kid, fix her daughter, and the TV does not respond. And so we have it to where the mother goes into the bathroom, and then bizarrely the bathroom ends up having siphoned into this window pipe thing some black smoke or whatever that ends up killing the mother. Like, kind of like it's an acid smoke of sorts that ends up just starting to kill the mother. And so while the mom is yelling and screaming in pain, while Tony is off just kind of going into his like desk room or whatever, because like he could give a rat's patootie about anybody. He's just in his office or whatever, just chilling. So we end up having it to where Nick is now panicking and trying to do whatever he can to help his mother, and Angie is out there with him, and there's nothing he could do. And so, like, his mother is trying to, like, say, like, one last thing to Nick, but eventually she sadly dies. We also have Angie tell us that it seems that she had went and looked into the TV that was in her room, and it seems that when she started taking it apart, she realized that there were some very strange, absurd things that she's never quite seen before. And so, to basically tell us that there is a quite possible alien living inside this room. And so, we end up having it to where uh, Nick goes on a journey to try and figure out how exactly he can be able to get some kind of evidence to convince his father to say, hey, like, there is something that isn't quite man made going on here. So we have it to where Nick starts burrowing a hole through one of these walls. He ends up just like making a hole large enough so he can be able to put some uh, camera or some kind of cell phone through this hole in this wall so he can uh, have some kind of footage of what is going on out there. And so he ends up getting back this footage, and he ends up seeing that there is an alien presence outside this home. And so we have it to where Nick brings this footage to his father, and so we have Tony, who is now severely paranoid of his own flesh and blood son, which I thought was crazy. I was like, wait a minute, like, this guy loves you. This is your son. And immediately you're just like, I don't trust him. I don't trust my own son. But whatever. I guess it is for story purposes and whatever. I guess some families fall apart or whatever at some point. But anyways. So we have it to where Tony brings this footage, or Nick brings this footage to Tony, and Tony will not watch it. He will not watch it. So we have it to where Nick goes to Scott and he's like, dude, I have some pretty sick footage. Let's go and let's talk to my dad. So we have it to where Nick and Scott go to Tony to showcase this footage, and Tony does not want to watch the footage. He grabs the phone from his son to just put the phone in his pocket because he's like, dude, I'm not watching this. I don't believe you. And we have it to where Tony immediately asks his own son, he's like, why is it that all of this stuff bizarrely just started to happen when you came home? Why is it that all of this stuff happened right now when you came home? And so we end up having it to where all of a sudden Tony is asking his own son, who sent you? As if Tony is now some pod person or some body snatcher or something along those lines to have burrowed into this home to, like, you would have thought if Tony was a completely different person and alienated this entire family, because, like, that would have been an amazing turn of events for this movie, to have it this entire time that this son comes back to be completely different than the rest of this family. And man, would that have been an amazing movie. And it would have been simple, but it would have been a little tweak to have it be that the son that came home wasn't the same son. Like how they would probably say, it's like, well, you know what, you're acting a little different than I remember you. It's like, well, hey, I'm just a different person, and so on and so forth. But then all of a sudden, like towards the very tail end of the movie, we end up finding out that this son coming home was actually an alien all along and was a body snatcher person. and was sent here to kill this entire family. Man, would that have been a giant twist to this movie, and I would have applauded that movie for doing that, but that's not what happened. I would have just been like, man, the twist, the big twist of this movie, man, that would have been cool. But I would have loved to have actually seen a movie like that, where it's like you have it to where like some family member ends up coming home, and you're just like, oh yeah, hey yeah, he's the same family the same person that we thought he was. But then eventually he just comes home and just kills the whole entire family. We're like, what the heck? And yeah, so like I guess that's kind of like the stepdad or the stepfather kind of movies where we have it to where the stepfather is like the nicest guy, and then eventually he ends up twisting and turning on all of his family and kills all of them at some point or another. Uh, but anyways, moving on. So back to where I was. So we have it where the father has no interest in seeing this movie. He never is going to watch the movie. He doesn't care. So we end up having it uh, to where reasonably the father uh, is basically threatening his own father. The father is threatening his own son. Basically, like going in, like getting weapons and stuff like that to uh, put into his son's face to say like, well, I'm gonna get answers from you. Like I know that you're one of them. You're like you're not who you say you are. And so we end up having it eventually uh, where it's kind of a numbers game. And so we end up having it to where uh, Tony ends up walking off. And while that is going on, we end up having it to where Angie and Scott are untying Nick because they're like, dude, like your dad is wigging out. And plus, also, we end up finding out that Kate still has her, like her womb is still, her belly is still moving. So her baby is still alive, but Kate is sadly dead. So we end up pushing on to have uh, Angie deciding like, well, we need to do a C-section. We need to get this baby out. And so while that's going on, we have Tony watching the screen, and this screen is showcasing a bunch of like worship me, like it's saying a bunch of like biblical things that are to have Tony just say like yeah, it's saying trust me, believe me, whatever, uh like uh uh like rejoice and everything like that, and like trying to have a number of words that are all, I guess, comforting to someone of who believes in the TV. And so we end up having it eventually where it goes on the TV that mentions uh, that someone needs to sacrifice for the good of the others, or somebody needs to sacrifice someone. And so Tony's like, well, I'm going to go and sacrifice somebody. And so immediately we just have it to where Tony is just scrambling to try and sacrifice somebody. And so immediately we have it to where Nick and Tony are fighting off one another, and we have Scott and Angie scrambling to pull off a C-section to get this baby to be born. And so we eventually have it to where Angie is saying, well, Scott, you need to help Nick. You need to stop Tony from getting to this baby. So, Scott, go over there and help Nick. And so immediately when Scott is to come over there, we have it to where Tony grabs a weapon of sorts and accidentally stabs Scott, and Scott falls over dead. And so we end up having it to where immediately there is this tussle going between Tony and Nick, to where eventually uh, they end up taking out Tony. Not, I don't think they exactly uh, like they don't exactly kill. No, wait, no, wait. They end up taking Tony out with the TV. They end up uh, throwing the TV over Tony's head to kill him. And so Angie's like, well, that was the right thing to do. Like, believe me, like, your father was insane. So we have it to where the baby is now born. So uh, we have Nick, we have Angie, and so the TV is now starting to move around. All of a sudden, there's a ton of wires that are coming out of this TV, and it is now possessing Tony. And so we have it to where this TV is now possessing Tony to tell these people, hey, be one of us, worship me, be like uh like do whatever we say, kind of thing. And so we we have it to where Nick is at some point trying to do a little bit of a keep away between uh, Nick, Angie, and this thing. And so they eventually get to separate it, and we have it to where Tony breaks through this door to talk to these people more. And so we eventually have it to where bizarrely Nick and Angie are starting to see some visual of them being in some uh, like place somewhere, and they're thinking, "Oh yeah, it's all over." But then eventually, they are breaking away from that reality to come back to where they were, and so we end up having it to where Nick is starting to realize something, that this thing is trying to manipulate them and trying to uh, like it needs them. And so we end up having Nick open the door to get even closer to this thing. And we have it toward Nick demands that this thing attack him, and it doesn't. And he's like, oh, so now I realize that you need me. You're a parasite, so you need me to live. So that way you can try to, like, oh, I get it. So you're thriving off of me being alive, kind of thing. And so we eventually have it to where uh, Tony ends up realizing that you cannot sway Nick and Angie to worship it or be a part of it or whatever. And so we eventually have it to where there just has to be a resolve of that. Where eventually we have it to where Tony has to eventually attack both Nick and Angie. And we are just kind of eventually going to have to be forcibly left with a baby to worship this thing. Where basically this thing is on a yet another TV to say, hey, worship me, love me, whatever. And so we have it to where besides this baby, everyone ends up just dying off. We end up having it to where Nick and Angie don't become like another possessed thing. It ends up just like, well, if you won't do what I say, then there's consequences to that too, kind of thing. And so we end up just kind of having this baby supposedly, I guess, going to worship this TV thing in the future. So we end up just kind of backpedaling off to just showcasing the house and how darkened and how very much the aliens have basically now dominated this planet to where it doesn't look anything familiar to us, and so on and so forth. And so basically, we are to assess or to assume that the aliens win at the end because they have to, and because probably any number of people had all taken their own lives or otherwise died because they won't conform to this alien thing. So I think that's all I wanted to say about this movie, but I like it. It's like I like it because it's so odd. I like it because it's a family that turns on one another, and we have it to where like this family isn't put together by all good circumstances, and it eventually gets worse when they are put into a world-ending circumstance. So, with that said, I am going to get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.